You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 112.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, violinist, teacher, and high-performance coach for musicians, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing amazingly well as you're listening to this episode. Today, you're in for quite a treat. I speak with Tom Hooten, principal trumpet player with the LA Philharmonic. Tom is one of the world's most prominent classical trumpeters today. He can be heard on numerous recordings with the LA Phil, the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, and the National Brass Ensemble. He began his career in the President's own United States Marine Band in Washington, D.C., where he was often a featured soloist. He went on to join the Indianapolis Symphony as assistant principal trumpet, Atlanta Symphony Orchestra as principal trumpet, and the LA Phil in 2012. He released Trumpet Call, his first solo album, in 2011. Tom is an active soloist and chamber musician, and he has appeared with many orchestras and ensembles throughout the United States. He's also a passionate and dedicated educator, teaching at the University of Southern California's Thornton School of Music, and he leads online programs supporting trumpet players from all over the world. We cover lots of great topics in our conversation, including tips on how to prepare for auditions, the importance of meeting ourselves where we are, exercising our muscle of vulnerability and connection, maintaining skills, and building a tailored practice routine. This was such a fun conversation for me. As he says himself, Tom is not a trumpet player. He's a musician who plays a trumpet, and a very inspiring musician he is. Be ready to walk away highly motivated and fully inspired by his energy and his wisdom. Let's go to the show. Tom Hooten, it's a real treat to have you on the show today.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Tom, as I've shared in the introduction, you're the principal trumpet with the LA Phil, but you also do so much more in parallel with your performance life. You're also an incredible pedagogue and communicator. You teach privately, you lead online programs, and you offer remarkably valuable content on social media. I resonate so much with so many of the concepts that you share, and you know this. And I cannot wait to take a deep dive into mindful practice ideas with you. But before, please tell us about you and your musical journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Thanks for having me, and all those things back at you. I just really admire, the content and your program. I'm always impressed with how organized and thoughtful your content is. So thank you for that. So my journey, I was a little bit unconventional in the way that I started as a young musician. I started piano when I was probably 7th grade and did not have any sense of taking it seriously, although I was fairly good at it. But I played trumpet in band in 7th grade, but I had no clue at any inkling about what it meant to be a professional musician or anything like that. So I enjoyed playing. Although I never had a trumpet teacher till I was a senior in high school. I would just kind of played whenever I felt like it. And I practiced piano because I really enjoyed that. I felt like it was a little bit more, over time, I learned about myself that I'm a really visual learner. And so piano was fun because I could see the keys. I could, and I could just kind of visualize how I wanted to put things together, whether it's like a little Bach invention or something like that. But flash forward to college, I still didn't have any idea that you could be a professional musician. I didn't know. I lived in Tampa, Florida, not a really hugely thriving classical music scene. And so I remember I decided, well, I guess I'm pretty good at trumpet. And I started taking a little bit of lessons, but I still was incredibly behind, especially compared to today's advanced high school players. So I did my entire undergrad degree, and for those of you that are instrumentalists listening to this, which I imagine is most of you, my embouchure, or like the fundamental technique of being a brass player, was really messed up. And it would sort of be like a professional runner that tries to run with their feet 3 feet apart. It was like, well, I could run, but it was
That's
really
an image right there.
Yeah, exactly. And just imagine, what would that sound like, for if you were a trumpet player with your lips all messed up and trying to play. Now, you could run, you could have some flexibility, but there would be kind of like a brick wall that you would hit. And I hit that wall at the end of my undergrad year. In my senior year in college, and I was practicing. I was really trying hard, and my gut told me that you are not going to get where you're going. I didn't know anything other than that except what my gut was screaming at me. So I met a man named Armando Gatalla, who was the former principal trumpet of the Boston Symphony, an incredible, and for the purposes of this podcast, what was incredibly influential to me from him was not only his trumpet teaching, but he was an amazing person. He was generous, strong disposition. He was caring, thoughtful, all these things. And he was as much a grandfather as I ever had, because I didn't really know my grandparents. So he and I decided to do an embouchure change. And essentially, this was incredibly significant for my career, my development, because when I started grad school, I started over. I relearned to play the trumpet from the ground up. And for about 9 months, there was psychological turmoil. I was depressed. I was frustrated. In a good way, I was naive. I just kept working hard. But I was having a tough time basically relearning to put my feet closer together, if you will, in the running analogy, and saying like, well, my goodness, some things are the same, but a lot feels really different. I lost my confidence. Any semblance of an identity that I was a trumpet player was lost because I could not demonstrate. And so the silver lining of that, the significance of that, was it really was a major shift in mindset about where do I look for ways to improve. In a sense, there was nothing, I didn't feel at the time that there was anything given to me, like, oh, build on this strength, it felt like nothing. I couldn't play for 9 months. So that was a long time ago. It was 20 something years ago, but to condense that started a shift in realizing I'm not a trumpet player. I'm a musician that is learning to play the instrument, that is the trumpet. And the beautiful thing was that I felt like from then on, I had nothing to lose. I'd already hit rock bottom. And you know what? I'll try anything. I will try anything. I'll ask anything. I'm okay. Everybody knows I can't do this because listen to me play. So fine, I'll ask anybody how to do anything. And that was a major shift. I'd already had some of that mindset, but it was just, I poured gas on it because it was like anybody can help me. And so I started also the idea of how important mindset was. Like I mentioned before, saying that I wasn't a trumpet player was liberating, because if I had a bad day, I didn't feel like a bad person. And so that was really great for me to start the evolution of understanding how important mindset, the basic psychology of how to improve, were really pivotal to me. And then later on, as I started having some success in auditions, my first job was in the President's Own Marine Band. Then I went to associate principal in Indianapolis, principal in Atlanta Symphony, and then now I ended up here in Los Angeles. But you can see from that, it was a very stepstone. It was sort of like, okay, I figured this out. Okay, like then I would ask myself, how do I continue to get better? What are those things? And it shifted between each of those steps. It was Sometimes it was mindset. Sometimes it was a physical distinction. Sometimes it was like, I need more experience. Sometimes it was like, you need to find a better teacher. And so I had probably more lessons after college than I did my entire undergrad and grad school combined, because I realized that I had a long way to go. So that's kind of like me in a nutshell. And then in the last couple years, I've gained the confidence of sharing some of my experiences with, a wider audience, whether it's like my trumpet mastery course, or my USC students or any kind of private students. And I'm passionate about meeting the student where they are, getting them to meet themselves where their talent ends. I feel like that's really important. And to realize there's no shame in that. That's actually really normal. And so I'm extremely grateful and happy about the opportunity to create an online curriculum that encompasses all of these things. And today, some of those things might include general basic psychology of how we understand failure, to different types of meditation, whether it's Kundalini or Osha chakra breathing, becoming more aware of the body, and how is that an experience for each of us very personally? How do we hold emotions, emotions like fear or joy? Like, what are there new ways to experience joy, not just in the mind, in the body? I'm fascinated about that, and how do we bring that in holistically to our musical offering to people that listen. I love that. That just juices me. I get chills thinking about that, because that's when the full experience of what a musician is like becomes just even more special, to the audience, that the audience member can feel, or you can channel a composer, or you can channel an emotion authentically, as the instrumentalist. I just, that really excites me. So that's kind of the journey in a couple minutes there. And I'm excited to see where it goes. I don't know where it goes from here, but right now I'm enjoying that kind of experience at this point.
Tom, that's an incredible journey, and thank you so much for sharing this. I don't even know where to start to unpack everything that you've shared. And as I've said already, I feel like we have so many shared values, this aspect of joy, the mindfulness, all of those things. But I feel that you're such a thoughtful musician, and hearing this story explains so much of that, because I'm sure, and as you've said yourself, these difficulties that you had to work through, it seems to have given you such a willingness to soak in everything, and you had to, as you said, work through so many difficult moments and of self-doubt. And it's really remarkable to hear this, because I feel that a lot of young musicians out there probably feel that the professionals that are working today might have had a straightforward line from picking up the instrument at 5 to landing a position, and we're not always aware of someone's intricate journey through working out difficulties. One sentence that you said in particular really is so important to hear, is about how you want the students to meet themselves where their talent ends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just find that that seems to be the first. Let's acknowledge that nobody ever in the world of being an instrumentalist had all the talent to create the career that they might want to build. We all have different levels of strengths and weaknesses, and I would even encourage the listener to acknowledge what kind of, air quotes here, talent they have. And it might be things that seem like insignificant to being a musician, but I challenge the listener to be open-minded about, like, what does organization have to do with this? Like, if you're a person that's like, you're just really good at being organized, you're like, well, that's not going to, that could really, really be an asset in terms of your ability to grow. But if you're a person that's the opposite, let's say you're a person that's incredibly disorganized, well, that could also be a big detriment to your ability to improve. So, whichever side of the fence you fall on that just one little topic, is that it's important to be willing to, and I'm not saying that we all need to just tackle all of our weaknesses, because if you don't master those, you're not going to be successful. But it is important, I think, for us to acknowledge from sort of a bird's eye view of like here's another example that's maybe more relevant to being a musician, is that like my wife, she can listen to a song on the radio and pretty much like after one or two times, she could probably figure out the melody on trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just like a seamless, like she hears it and she can almost like, she knows what buttons to push, on the trumpet. It's like, I am just not like that. And sometimes hearing something and like really clearly in my head is just not as easy as for her. And so just simply me acknowledging that, like, oh, is that something that as a college student you think someday you're like, oof, maybe I'm just not cut out for that. It's like, no, that's my talent is not there. But what would it be like for me to work on that as a baby? Like, what would it be like? It would be like, well, try to play Mary Had a Little Lamb in all keys. Okay, I'll start there. And just because somebody else in my same class is sitting there playing changes on, Caravan, like, it's like, I'm not even close to that. It doesn't matter. And in fact, I think, that kind of transparency, that kind of willingness to meet yourself wherever it might be remedial. That's okay. Mm-hmm. It's totally fine.
Yes. I love that sentence. I say that to my clients all the time too. It's one of my favorite. And I feel like this is probably, do you think I'm wrong? This is probably the reason why you're so great at helping so many people, is because you have spent time researching, dedicating yourself to figuring things out. That's probably one of the reasons why you're so great at communicating effectively how to practice.
Perhaps. I think it really comes down to problem solving, and you have something that you're trying to do. And if attempt 1, 2, 3 don't get you what you want, well, this is overly cliche, but how many light bulbs did Edison try before, and it's in a way trying to help the student find that creative, non-judgmental creative mindset that says like, there's another book called Soprano on Her Head, like what silly, crazy way could you devise that will help you find a distinction, to find a perspective, to understand context, to get out of ourselves, to understand what is it like for Renee to do that shift? Like I'm just going to sit there and brainstorm and think about that. What is that? What does it feel like? I wonder how she's sitting. I wonder how she's breathing. I wonder what the tension is like in her arm. Does she hear it? Is she looking at the shift? Just to get like kind of annoyingly curious and just ask a bazillion questions. And then that little thought experiment might, and what I want to do is jump alongside the student. And I want to find out, I want to get behind their eyes and say, what does this look like to them? What are they not seeing? What are they presuming is true that maybe doesn't have to be true? I love that. That juices me. And then when you see somebody have a light bulb, like, oh, and then, I want to help students find that, because then if I can help that, then implementing is like much easier. But we need to find like-minded viewpoints, context, perspective, self-awareness. Where is the sort of the blind spot?
Right. Yes. This is so great. I love it. Tom, I know that you have world premiere coming up very soon.
Yes.
A work by Esa-Pekka Salonen, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh no, this one's actually by Steve Mackie. He's a shredding guitarist.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really challenging.
One of the things I'm really curious about, and I'm sure you get that question asked all the time, is your process in the practice room. So maybe this could be a good example to use as to how you take a work from the beginning stages to the concert stage. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that with us?
Sure. Well, I will say, I mean, I have done that in many ways, but actually this is the first time I've ever done like a piece that's been commissioned for me, kind of. It's not, I don't think he's writing it for me, but I mean, it's been commissioned for the LA Phil with this performance. So I've never actually done a full concerto new like this, but so I really had to think about it, and some of the things in this really pushed me, are really pushing me to my limits of endurance, range, different techniques, different sound profiles. The title of the piece is Trumpet Fantasy, or Shivery, which is like to make a calamity, a noise, and there's 12 movements, and so there were probably 6 to 10 things in here that were like, oh my goodness, this is really, really hard. I've never had to do tongue slap before, where I make a pitch by going thup, 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 and then immediately go to play like thup, beam, thup, beam, thup, thup, beam, stuff like that. So let me back out a second. So how do I tried to get clear on what do I want to happen. I think that's a great question for us. If you're trying to do something, what is the end result? Well, I want the end result I want to be present on the stage when I'm playing this. I want to be confident. I want to be relaxed to some degree. I want to be prepared. Okay, so let's start backing up from that. So I started making a list, and if people want to go to my website, tomhooten.com, there's a practice chart there. There's a self-assessment questionnaire that I can come back to in a second that really plays a large part in how I teach. So what I did is I just got really black and white about this. I said, all right, in this board you see me behind here, I literally just erased it this morning. And
you're hiding all the secrets.
Yeah. Well, this was for my IG live this morning. Does that look... Oh, it is backwards. I mean, does it look backwards to you? Can you read that?
No.
Okay. I actually had to write it backwards for the IG Live. But anyway, so what I had on this board here was a list of about 12 to 15 things, specific things. These are things that are going to need my consistent attention, that I'm not going to be able to cram for. I'm not going to be able to just put together in a couple days. So I wrote that list. And I did a couple things, and maybe I'm jumping forward a little bit in some of the questions you might want to ask. But one of the most difficult things for at least the people that I coach trumpet is, how do I create a routine? How do I do things? Like, how do I manage my time well? I mean, we can even go back to say, like, are you planning your next day when you're going to practice? Today's Friday. Do I know when I'm going to practice tomorrow? If I'm in college, it shouldn't be too hard to plan a couple days in advance. Like, here's when I'm going to practice. That's my job right now. My job is to practice. I'm going to put that on the schedule, just like if I have to go to my other job where I make money. Right now, I'm making the investment. So it's really important for us to get into the driver's seat about that, like to be intentional about this time is my time. This is important to do that. And so, because if we could talk about all the practice techniques, all the practice charts in the world, but if you're not giving yourself the commitment of the time that it's going to take to facilitate those things, well, then all we're doing is creating a frustration cocktail.
Yes.
It's not going to work. So
I like that term, frustration cocktail.
I just made it up.
I've had several of those.
Yeah, me too. So what I did is I just gave black and white. The first thing is I'm 100% honest with myself. What can I do? What can I not do? There's no judgment there. It's like, okay, I can't do these things, and here's what they are. I'm going to implement a way to work on this. So there's an app that I use that your followers might be interested in. It's called Seconds Pro. Looks like this. And this is a workout interval trainer. And so if I wanted to create a new workout, there's different ones. You can see this is like a geared towards exercising, but there's like Tabata timer, hit timer. But I can go to custom timer and I can start implementing trumpet tonguing. How long? 5 minutes. And then I go and I build another one. And so what I've done is I've I'll show you what I've built for this concerto. For the Mackie Concerto, this is an hour and a half routine that I start, and it times through this. And I say, look, lip trill is one of those things. Another thing, flugelhorn. Now, I might want to go deeper on these, but if I definitely want to have incremental improvement on these over time, which is really how we get better, then high E. I have about 75 high E's in this extremely difficult. And so it keeps going through. And I know your viewers can't see this, but this is basically like an interval trainer. The app is called Seconds Pro. So I create these programs for myself because here's going back to like my talent is not to be super focused for hours and hours. That is not my talent. I know that I am super easily distracted. I hate that. It's the way I'm wired right now. And so rather than just say, oh, I'm an idiot, I can't do that, I'm going to meet myself and say like, hey, this timer is going to give you about a minute of rest. And it's going to say, beep, go to the next thing, because I could easily just stick on the first one for like 45 minutes and not get to the others. Right. So this thing there's 19 intervals. Rest is a large part of that. And it goes through each of these techniques. And so that's one tool, lever, if you will, that's helping me prepare for this. Another one might be a normal general practice thing. Like here's a routine, and I have dozens of those that I've created for myself. And so there's one that helps me stay well-rounded, and then I will do that periodically in tandem, or not tandem, in sort of like seesaw between those, So that's one way. And I'm focusing on technique right now. I'm focusing on tools that are going to help me have a musical offering. Sometimes people will get critical of my teaching, and it doesn't bother me, but they'll say, like, you talk a lot about technique, you talk a lot about embouchure. Yeah, and the reason is, for me, is that there's still times where my technique dictates my lack of technique or lack of skill dictates the way the music goes. Mm-hmm. I don't like that.
I think that goes for everybody too.
Right. I mean, if there's a difficult passage that you have and it's hard and you kind of play it how you can play it, you don't have any options. That seems sad. It's like, it would be awesome. In the ideal world, you'd be like, well, I'd like to play it softer, faster, louder, slower, whatever. I could do all those things. And so I want to have those choices. So I try to build in a fundamental base that is something I try to hit consistently, either daily or several times a week. And then I try to build around that. Sort of, you could think of it as like a core set of skills that is, over time, is atrophying unless I tend to it. So if your listeners can visualize, imagine a circle, and inside that circle is all of your skill. And if you don't tend to that, it'll just slowly shrink, right? Of course, right. If you don't practice things, it'll shrink. If I tend to it daily, I can get that to grow. Well, growing actually starts encompassing things that are outside of me now, in an organic nature. So if I'm practicing single tonguing, finger techniques, and arpeggios, and I get those things to a certain speed, I can play Petrushka, the solo in Petrushka, because my circle of skill encompasses that. So I hope that makes sense for your listeners. But that's kind of like, I hope that's clear. That's, there's the core, and then there's certain things that I'm trying to extend for this particular piece. And of course, there's the musical message of, I'm studying the score. I'm trying to get in touch with what I want to communicate and making sure that my technique serves that.
This is such invaluable information. And to tie it into something that you've said before is you met yourself where your talent ended, and you figured out systems to overcome the challenges that you were facing. And you really spent a lot of time thinking about ways to make all of these visions come together. And one thing I want the listeners to keep in mind is a quote that I shared on social media recently about focusing less on the structure and more on the purpose, because
Mm-hmm.
I could feel that a lot of people would hear what you're just saying and try to mimic exactly those systems and
Right.
methods that you've just described, which I'm sure would not be a bad thing. But it's also, how can you take everything that Tom just said and turn that into a system that would work for you, be inspired by what you just said, have a little bit of introspection as to how you
Yeah.
function and who you are, and then create a system that works for you as well.
Well, I think the word that I would highlight in what you just said was create.
Mm-hmm.
Like not just make, create, like from a place of what's the why? What does each person listening right now, what do they want to create? Not just, of course you want to create a routine. Okay, you want to create an exercise, but why? That's what you're saying. It's like, and then why? When eventually you'll get to the point where, it's really clear. But yeah, mimicking, there's been lots of opinions about mimicking, and in classical music, we can go too far. I'll just stick with classical music for now, but lots of places, mimicking is obviously a good thing. If we go too far, then it starts to lack creativity. And I'm going to just say that I've been really guilty of this. As I get older and as the people that I aspire to imitate or mimic, I don't know, I hope this doesn't sound egotistical, but like where my skills start to be more parallel to theirs, then I have become more and more free to feel like I can be more creative with the way I hear it, the way I think it should go, and using all of their inspiration, using and creating my own sort of like cocktail of how music can go, or what I want to express or share. So I don't think imitation is bad, but it is not the end.
Right.
It is the beginning of creating your own version or journey.
I love this. Tom, this month on the podcast and in the Mind Over Finger Facebook community, I talk about audition preparation. And I know that you've got some experience with this. What is some advice that you would give the listeners on audition preparation? It's a big topic, but
Yeah.
some golden nuggets.
Yeah, sure. So, again, if you go to my website, there's a practice chart there. And this practice chart, basically, I'll try to keep it to 2 minutes here. What I basically did was let's use a simple analogy of like, I wanted to make a meal.
Mm-hmm.
And the meal was all of the pieces that were required for the audition. So it might be like a big smorgasbord, it's going to be a little bit of everything. And that's kind of the point of the audition. It's like, can this chef make all these meals, and how different are they? How flexible are they? Is this, how good can you use all the tools in your kitchen? So what I did was I created one practice chart, which you can see on my website, and I listed all of the excerpts on the left-hand side. And then it was little boxes for like the months, the days of the month. And I wanted to know, like, how often was I getting to these? Because I wanted them, at the end of the day, I wanted them to all feel close and fresh, right? Some of them I did every day, but others I just kept on a couple-day rotation. And that chart was important because I would notice, like, oh my God, that one that I just don't feel good about, like, well, son of a gun. It's been 2 weeks since I played that one. You're like, okay, I'm not going to judge myself. It's just really clear I don't like practicing that one. That's probably why it doesn't feel good. Then maybe the more important chart, I think it's the more important chart, I would look at that first list and I'd say, okay, these are the meals I need to create. What are my ingredients? And I'd start with the most simple. So you need water. That's going to be air for brass players. I need, and you keep going. You say, well, I need flour. I need something crispy. I need something gooey. I need cheese. I need meat. You need all these different things. And what are those? What are those ingredients? So as a trumpet player, I'll just rattle off a dozen here. You need range. What's the range? Low and high. I need speed of fingers. Well, how fast? I need speed of tonguing. I need intervals. I need scales. I need flexibility. I need loud. I need soft. And I just keep going. I'm like, holy cow, this is a lot. This is too much. That's why you have the chart.
Yes.
You're not supposed to keep track of it all in your head. It's too much. It's impossible. It's impossible for me. It was impossible for me. So what I would do, I would look at all those ingredients. Some of them I would do every day because it was like creating my core set of skills, which served probably 50, 60% of all of the excerpts I needed. And then let's say one day I'm like, I need to go deep on this tonguing thing. And why am I doing that? Because I have to play Alvarado. Okay. I will work really hard that day on triple tonguing and I won't practice Alvarado. That's totally fine. I'm actually working on Alvarado. And then vice versa. I worked hard on Alvarado one day, but 2 days went by, I didn't work on triple tonguing. That's fine. You're still working on triple tonguing. So I'm working on the fundamental and I'm working on the application, and I'm just constantly going back and forth. And of course, there's a million different things about mock auditions and mindset. But from a technical standpoint, I was going to be much more confident if I felt like all these things were close and my technique was in the best place for me to serve those. And that really served me well, because at the end of the day, I hate to say this, auditions are won by trust, and people, and how do we develop trust is no holes in your playing, like massive holes. You're gonna have notes you miss. There's going to be things that don't go well, but if it's at a high enough level that people trust, like that was a mistake. Wow, that was great. Well, it was great. There's no way that was a mistake. So developing trust with the committee is our ultimate goal. And the more honest we can be with ourselves and disciplined to make sure that we spend the time to make those skills in a place that elicits that trust, you're gonna have room to make mistakes, which I did in every audition I won, and you're gonna be in a great place to make good, really nice music.
Such great advice there. Thank you so much for this. Tom, I'd love to speak more, and I'm sure that the listeners would like to hear more, but how about a round of rapid fire questions before I let you go?
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it.
For the people who are dreaming of a career that resemble yours, and we know that we all create our own, so that's why I say resemble. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what your life looks like?
It's very busy. I have 2 children, and I have a lot of interests. So my weeks are a mixture of LA Phil rehearsal performances, teaching at USC, teaching online, some recording in the movie industry. I've had the opportunity to do some really awesome, fun movies, Jumanji and stuff like that, or Lion King, and spending time with my kids. That's but it's quite busy. In all honesty, some of it's my own doing, but I'm up at like 6:30. Maybe earlier, and I usually go to bed at midnight almost every day. And a lot of that is doing things that I'm passionate about. But yeah, it's a lot of time commitment. And my biggest challenge now is creating time to not do. But that's, but I like it. I love what I do. So it's my choice, but it is busy. And, but yeah.
Awesome. What's a habit that you have that you think contributed to your success?
Being a really good question asker.
I love that. That's a great one. Then moving on to the skills that you think young musicians studying today should acquire in addition to learning to play their instruments.
Try not to judge yourself too much about where you're not at yet. Yeah, I want to come back to this question. Like, don't be afraid to ask a question. Don't be afraid to show you don't know.
That's really important to hear.
I really think it's important. And the thing is, if you're in school and maybe you're considered one of the better players in your school, do not wrap your actions around maintaining that visual or that optic. In fact, be a better leader and say, look, hey, I am one of the best people in this school, and I'm the first one to ask questions about what I don't know. That actually will garner more respect, and you'll continue to be a top player rather than the person that holds on to the few things that got you to that position. I was the tortoise. I was the underdog. And nobody in the million years would have thought me being in my undergrad, oh, Tom's going to be principal trumpet of the LA Phil. No way.
Mm-hmm.
No way. But it's that insatiable curiosity.
I love this so much. How about a favorite tool in the practice room?
Ooh. Oh boy, God. Oh, that's a hard one. Well, I have this thing. Oh, you can't see. I forget. You can hear it. This is it's a little bead counter that I have on the bottom I screwed to the bottom of my stand, a little sort of like 20 bead counter. And when I'm looking for consistency and my brain says, oh, you got this. And then I look down, I'm like, I've only played it twice right. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's a little accountability tool. There's a million tools though. But I'll just stick with that one.
I love it. I think I'm going to need one of those. Can I order that on Amazon or something?
Yes, I'll send you a link.
Thank you. I'll put it in the show notes too, because I know that you like tools. You talked about that app. I'll share a link to that in the show notes too, in the metronome. I was not expecting a bean counter. I love it. Okay, I'm going to buy one. That's done. How about, I'm really interested in this answer. A favorite book that you would recommend to the listeners?
Okay, well, I'm just going to tell you what I'm reading now. And I will preface this by saying there is colorful language. This person does not hold back at all. David Grogan's Can't Hurt Me. This guy basically goes to the limit and gives me an idea of like what we are capable of as human beings is so much farther than what we imagine is possible. And so from an exercising standpoint, I've been pushing. I don't like the word pushing. I've been exploring what it's like to embrace discomfort. You know, and I'm not saying we should be I'm not saying bad technique in violin or trumpet or whatever. I'm saying of like discomfort of like, oh, I think I should stop now. Or, you know, you get the slightest bit of resistance of like, oh, this is hard. It's like Muhammad Ali said, they said, how many push-ups can you do? Because I have no idea. I'm like, what do you mean you have no idea? He's like, well, I don't start counting until it hurts.
Wow. Okay.
And you're like, oh, wow. So David Grogan's Can't Hurt Me is, it's an incredibly inspiring chronicling of what this man went through in his life. It's really amazing.
I knew you were going to have a good answer to this question. It's another thing from my Amazon cart.
Yeah.
Finally, how about a quick actionable tip that listeners can implement today in their musical lives?
Let's say I would encourage people to, wherever you're at, if you're in school, if you're in a profession, explore a moment of vulnerability with a colleague or a friend about something you're struggling with. And ask them if they have any advice. You know, you say like, hey, you know, I've been working on my range lately. Like, how do you work on range? And exercise the muscle of vulnerability and connection with other people, and see what happens. It might spark something. You know, it might give you a different perspective. It might start other conversations that, you know, and that I think this idea of competition is really more like conspiring together, and we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to make beautiful music, and so we spend so much time by ourselves in a practice room, like so much. Like I think it's really healthy for us to remember that a lot of people are on the same journey together, and just because somebody else, you're not trying to hide all your secrets, you're trying to share them. I know that's hard for people to realize sometimes, but I really believe that. It's like there's a movie called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, and it was a mathematical thing that was significant. But the idea was that if we feel that there's scarcity, and back in the day before unions helped protect musicians, blah, 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 musicians would hold on to their what's the word, proprietary ideas. You know, it's like, oh no, I figured out how to do this. I'm not going to share with it because I could get fired. That's understandable. But I think now it's good and it's beneficial for us to share ideas. And that would be what I would say.
Fantastic advice. Tom, you've already mentioned some resources on your website. Where can we find everything? Please tell us more about what you're offering as well in terms of courses and where we can hear you, all of the good stuff.
I would say the most active place I'm at right now is just Instagram. I do have a website. Through Instagram, I have a link tree which shows some things that are in my bio. It's a link tree which goes to several different places. If you're a brass player, you can check out some of the things I have on my Amazon store. You can check out my trumpet mastery course, which I will be having offerings probably in the spring and definitely next summer. I'm really excited about next summer, what I'm going to create. I've had 2 offerings the last 2 summers and learned a ton about how to create effective courses. And so this summer, I think is going to be the child of those learnings. So I think Instagram would be a great place to start, whether it's ideas around self-improvement and or good old brass playing.
Awesome. I'll have all these links in the show note. Tom, thanks so much for this amazing insight. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know that the listeners will as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great questions. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with musician and trumpet player Tom Hooten. I just had the greatest time with Tom, and so many things he said will stay with me in the coming days. I can't pick a favorite, but I want to invite you to take a second listen to Tom's actionable tip and see what that would look like in your life this week. I think it's so important for all of us to step away from the scarcity mentality and remember that we're all on the same journey together. So exercise your muscle of vulnerability and connection, share your insight with others, spark conversations, ask for help, and offer support to the musicians around you, and let us know how it went. If you relate to this conversation, don't forget to share with everyone you think could benefit from Tom's wisdom. Connect with us, and let's keep this discussion going. I'm Mind Over Finger on both Instagram and Facebook, and he's Tom Hooten. Now, if you're looking to take your practicing and performing to the next level, I have something for you. Practicing for Peak Performance, my performance preparation workshop, is now available for download. If you're looking for a process that works and that will allow you to enjoy more efficient practice sessions, gain confidence, and perform at your best, check out Practicing for Peak Performance at mindoverfinger.com. When you join Practicing for Peak Performance, you gain access to all the recorded content that's over 7 hours jam-packed with information, guidance, and effective high-performance systems. You get detailed handouts and worksheets, access to the PPP Facebook group community for support and answers to all your questions, and for a limited time, a complimentary private 30-minute coaching session with me. So if ease and joy in a performance sounds like the kind of results you'd like to experience, head to mindoverfinger.com right now and access all the tools that will help you transform your practice, gain confidence in your process, and start performing at your best today. As always, I'll have all the information related to this episode in the show notes. You can find them via your podcast app or by visiting mindoverfinger.com. And while there, you can also find more information about mindful and efficient practice, performance preparation, and how to work with me. And don't forget to sign up for my newsletter to receive your free guide to a productive, mindful practice using the metronome. So that's it for today. Again, thank you, and à bientôt.